Katie Rich is the Second City alum, SNL writer, and co-creator of Chicago Party At, which is debuting on Friday on Netflix. Katie, first of all, I love this series. I'm a couple episodes in. I mean, how fun was it to create this whole universe centered in Chicago?
Oh my gosh, it was so fun. It was too easy in a lot of ways. But it was so great to be able to tap into what right, and we were lucky enough to have a lot of a few of the people in our writers room were not from Chicago, which was good because I think otherwise it might have been over the top is what we were talking about. So it was nice to have folks in there that we could be like, do you know who this person is? And they're like, no, I don't. And one of the weirdest things that I discovered was that the most like well-known Chicago Bear is like, to people who aren't sports fans and aren't from Chicago, is Jay Cutler,
Interesting.
because he's like a reality show guy too.
I guess that would be, yeah, because Kristen Cavallari and the whole reality series,
Yeah.
I guess that would make sense and people would understand that.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the Twitter account. Chris Witowski, also, a friend of yours, Second City alum, created this Twitter account about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
When did the rest of the universe, as far as the other characters, come into play? And when did you kind of start collaborating with him on this whole project?
So this was about 3 years ago, and myself and him and John Barinholtz, the other creator, we basically wrote the pilot after we had pitched it, and so this is like, gosh, this is January of like 2019, I want to say. I mean, that's how long it takes. And so we had kind of started before that, sort of fleshing the world out, just to pitch it as a show, right? On Twitter, it's just a character. It's just a joke. It's just joke, right? And so, yeah, after that, it was just, once we wrote that pilot, we were like, okay, I think I see what this is. And it really is a show that, as I hope you see, is like kind of heartwarming in a way. Like, it's not like it is raunchy, and it's definitely it's definitely raunchy comedy, but it is actually at its core, it's a story about like being good to your family and your friends and the people that love you, and so it just it was really great to be able to expand on something like that with people that I knew and people that I shared a common language with.
Oh, exactly. Now you voiced one of the characters, Zuzana. Let's talk a little bit about her. Did you create that character, and what made you want to voice her?
We all created. We definitely wanted to have a Polish character in there because there's such a huge Polish population, obviously, in Chicago. But we didn't. It wasn't that I wanted to do. We didn't create it. We didn't create characters so that we could specifically voice them. We created the characters, and then the voicing came later. So so that wasn't that was she existed already, so it was easier to step in and become her because she was already a fully formed person in our minds.
Now let's talk a little bit about Diane. She is the main character of the show, and right from the beginning we get to see she lives on Waveland. I mean, if you're from Chicago, if you party in Wrigleyville, if you know, I mean, that's an epicenter for so many people right there.
Yeah, and I think all of us, I mean, the vast majority of us who were from Chicago that were working on it lived in some horrible apartment in that, in that epicenter. Like, we all have lived there. And her apartment isn't real. It's not, it sadly doesn't exist. But we wanted to make it kind of a relic because now Wrigleyville is very different, as we know. We wanted to make it the relic of those old brownstones that were there that we all rented and probably destroyed, and you know what I mean. So that's where we wanted her to be. We wanted her to be on almost like a rent controlled apartment type deal where it's like we can't get rid of her.
Exactly, because if you want to go to one of those brownstones and you want to stumble over to Taco Bell, I mean, that's a thing of the past. It's not the same Wrigleyville that it was before.
There's no Taco Bell anymore. It's so sad.
I know.
I think we even have a line like that in there of like, where's the Taco Bell?
Now let's talk a little bit because there's so many Chicago-centric things. I mean, especially with how wonderful the three of you created this series. Let's talk a little bit about the 85 Bears, especially people out of Chicago. I mean, still, revered, so much, to this day. I mean, you mentioned the name Mike Ditka to people, and people, tear up. People have such emotions connected to those 85 Bears. I mean, what was it like to put that into the script?
I think if we hadn't put that into the show, I mean, spoiler, the 85 Bears are in the show. It would really not be a Chicago show because, as we know, Chicagoans like to hold on to things that was many years ago, and we still are talking about it. It's still very important to us. So we really wanted to make sure that we were able to get them in there, and we also we have, well, I don't want to spoil it, but we have our version of the Super Bowl shuffle in there as well.
Insider, yeah, you got to wait. I think it's like episode 5 or 6 where you got to go and go ahead and check that out.
Our version.
Let's talk a little bit about the marathon. It's coming up in Chicagoland. It's such a huge thing. It takes over so many different neighborhoods. There's a whole episode dedicated to it. Have you been a spectator? What was the marathon like for you during your time in Chicago?
I've never run the marathon, and I never will. That is one thing that I'm more than happy to say I will die never having accomplished that. But one thing that like performers in Chicago do, and it's really everywhere, but we would get these jobs when we first started out as like passing out stuff at events or like doing promo work. Promo work was like a big way that we were able to afford our lifestyles. And I remember it would pay like $50 or something where we were like, oh my God, that's so much money, like to just do this. And I never really cared about the marathon that much. And then I got assigned to pass out, I think, some kind of granola bar. And I was there with this other girl, and we got so into it. We were just like, this is amazing, and like you're crying, like you see these people, and you're able to see so many different stories run by you, and it's just like such a celebration of the city and all these different people together. And so I got very, very into the marathon. I think it's just like a very I wish I was a different person sometimes and I would be able to run it, because I think that would be such a cool way to see the city. But friends that I have that have run the marathon say it's just absolutely beautiful. And it's so cool to do. And it's such an amazing way to just spend time in Chicago.
Well, I mean, it's not just, to get exercise. I mean, there's people who overcome illnesses, people that are raising money, people that are doing it to challenge themselves, siblings that are doing it together. I mean, you think it, and it's such an important part. And Chicagoans are always wonderful, but I feel like that's the one day where our city always comes together and just cheers people on. Yeah.
And it's like, some people walk it. Like, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't realize like you could walk the marathon. You can, but yeah, like you said, there's all these different stories as to why these people do. Because in your head you're like, oh, it's these runners, and but it is, it is that, which is great. But it's also all these different. There's so many different reasons why people do it, and it's really beautiful. And so we thought that would be a really lovely way to showcase other parts of the city too, by having the marathon. And our animation team just killed it. I mean, that's not easy to do, to have to animate, huge crowd scenes and all these different neighborhoods and things like that. So, so they really did such a great job on that. I'm so grateful for that team. They're unbelievable.
In a couple of weeks after the marathon is Halloween. There's a special Halloween episode featuring Roscoe's, featuring Boys Town. I mean, do you have any favorite memories of either partying there on Halloween or just, partying there in general?
It's so funny because I used to wait tables at Bar Louie across the street from Wrigley. And so Halloween, if you're in the service industry, Halloween and New Year's Eve, but to me, I think especially Halloween is such a terrible holiday, because it's always just like, oh, it's just adults behaving in the worst way possible. And you're just like, there's always especially when you see, I'm sure this is everywhere, but my memories of Halloween in like Boys Town or in Wrigleyville were always a woman dressed as, I don't know, like Zorro or something, like throwing up while she's fighting with her boyfriend who's dressed as a Hooters girl, like, you know what I mean? And so one thing that I always thought was so fun to do was then the next day to watch people have to get home in these costumes, like after they've made these terrible decisions.
Their walk of shame.
Their walk of shame is so much fun on November 1st because everyone's in these insane costumes. So we have a little hat tip to that too. And the other thing that I found to be crazy is how over the years Halloween has become like a very long holiday. Like I feel like Halloween is a week and a half long, depending on where it falls. Like there's just celebrations all, like, you know, from the weekend before, the day of, the weekend after. Like it's just such a long holiday. So I think we tried to give a little bit of a homage to that. But, you know, Halloween in Boys Town is the best Halloween.
It's, if you're looking for a good time, that's the place to go. I don't exactly know what they're doing this year, but if you're looking for a good time, that's the place to go. Yeah. Now, let's talk about Wiener Circle, iconic burger, hot dog place. You know, once you finish the bars, you know, when the guys in their Hooter outfits and the women in their Zorro costumes. I mean, you head on over there. I mean, it's awesome that got a shout out in the show. Were you a fan of the place? Did you go there late nights? Did you talk to them about including them in the show? What was that conversation like?
I think so many people know about the Wiener Circle is it's pretty well known, actually. I remember this is so weird, but I remember there was a 17 magazine. This is when I was in high school, and like all you had were magazines, and you would get your hands on like a magazine, and that's all you had, and that's how you learned everything. Anyway, they had like fashion from different cities. And I remember the Chicago one was just a girl in like a puffer vest. And it said that her job was that she worked at a hot dog stand where they yelled at the customers. And I remember being like, what? No, like, what are you talking about? Like, she's like this model, you know what I mean? I was like, what are you talking about? But it for some reason, the Wiener Circle has really permeated its way. I mean, Conan obviously did a bit there. People have done bits there and stuff like that. It has permeated its way into the culture of what people think of when they think of Chicago. But one thing that we had to make sure we did was kind of for people who don't know, which I'm sure the vast majority of people don't actually know what it is, be clear that like this is a real thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we didn't make this up. This is a real thing where people, because otherwise it just looks like, why do you have these women screaming at these people?
Oh, exactly. And before you watch Chicago Party, go ahead and YouTube Conan O'Brien with Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. Yes. There, it's a whole bit. You'll understand it.
Very real, a very real thing. So we had to kind of, without having something pop up on the screen that's like, this is a real thing, we didn't make this up, you know, we had to be like, this is a real thing.
Oh, exactly. Now, one of the other voices in there is RuPaul, obviously icon in the drag community, in the music community. And what was it like? Because especially, you know, you have a couple of scenes together in the beauty shop, but then also, you know, creating the character. I mean, what was it like to have RuPaul on board?
I mean, we were so happy. I mean, we were just so excited when he signed on and getting to, you know, the one thing that I mean, if this is the worst thing that happened, it's fine. But because of COVID, we obviously couldn't be together when we were recording. We were hoping we could do some records together, like all of us in a room and play off each other and things like that, but we couldn't do that. So everything was basically remote. So I would like get in my office and I would log in, and like RuPaul would be, you know, in the studio, and it was so much fun. It was just amazing to get to work with him and get to, there's definitely some lines in there where he was like, no, I'm saying it like this, and you can't tell me otherwise. You know what I mean? And he was right. He was always right. So that was just always a very surreal moment. You're in the middle of this global pandemic. You're, you know, in your house, like just barely, you know, surviving. And then you log on and you're like, oh my God, there's RuPaul. The same lines that I wrote. That's insane.
Most people are talking to their best friends or their aunts or, you know, their coworkers. Not everybody gets a chance to talk to RuPaul over Zoom.
I was like, well, there's RuPaul. And I think it might have gotten to a point where they were like, Katie, you can't come to these records anymore because you just try to get him to like I would just try to be like ask him questions and get opinions on things and